My sister said she was pregnant with my husband's baby during dinner. My mom started crying. Then I revealed why she was lying. Imagine this. You're at a family dinner. Just a normal Sunday dinner. Your mom, your sister, your husband, you're eating, you're talking. Everything is normal. And then your sister sets down her fork. And she says, I need to tell you all something. Your stomach drops because you know that tone. You know, that's the tone people use when they're about to say something that can't be unsaid. She says, I'm pregnant. Everyone smiles, congratulations. It's wonderful news. And then she says the rest. And the baby is husband's names. Your mother literally stops eating. Your husband's face goes blank. Your own brain can't process what you just heard. Your sister just announced in front of your mother that she's pregnant with your husband's baby. And your mother starts crying. Not angry crying. Devastated crying. The kind of crying that comes from having your world shattered. Your husband is denying it. You're denying it. But your sister is sitting there calm, waiting for the reaction to settle. And then you realize she planned this. She planned this moment. She chose this setting. She did this deliberately. And you're about to find out why. But first, you have to prove she's lying. And that's where this story gets complicated. Okay, before I read this full story, let me give you context. This is from our Just Know family and our Entitled family. And when it was posted, it blew up because the accusation is so extreme. The lie is so calculated and the reason behind it is so psychologically twisted. This story covers a family dynamic with a troubled sister, a marriage that seems solid but isn't, an accusation dropped like a bomb at dinner, the immediate shock and devastation, the proof the accusation is false. But here's where it gets dark. The sister knows it's false. She did it anyway for a specific reason. That reason is about jealousy, manipulation, and psychological warfare. The family's processing of the betrayal. How this accusation damages relationships even after it's disproven. The aftermath and lasting trauma. What's interesting about this story is that it's not about infidelity. It's about someone weaponizing the accusation of infidelity to cause damage. It's about someone who's so envious and angry that she's willing to destroy her entire family to hurt one person. By the end, you're going to understand something dark about jealousy and how far some people will go to make others feel as miserable as they do. Let's get into it. I'm 38 years old. I'm married to my husband David for 9 years. My sister Rachel is 35. Rachel and I have never been close. We grew up together, but we've always been different. I was the more outgoing one. I did well in school. I built a career. I got married young and had a stable life. Rachel struggled. She had a hard time in school. She didn't finish college. She had a series of jobs that she didn't keep. She had a series of relationships that didn't work out. And I think I know she resented me for it. It wasn't something she said explicitly. It was something you felt in the way she talked about my life, the way she'd comment on my house, my marriage, my career, my kids, always with this edge, this undertone of anger. Oh, it must be nice to have everything figured out. Some of us aren't as lucky as you. It's easy when you get everything handed to you. Nothing was handed to me, but I don't think Rachel saw it that way. In her view, I just won at life, and she just lost. Our mother enabled Rachel's perspective. She'd say things like, Rachel's had a harder time than you. Be patient with her. She's struggling. And I was patient. I was supportive. I'd help Rachel when she needed money, when she needed advice, when she needed somewhere to stay, but none of that ever seemed to be enough. She still resented me. This is the key dynamic to understand. Rachel wasn't just struggling. Rachel was angry at me for not struggling. And she felt entitled to something. Sympathy, help, acknowledgement, that life was unfair to her. She didn't think about that my success was a result of my choices, my effort, my decisions. Over the years, Rachel became increasingly unstable. She had a few incidents, some with alcohol, some with anger. One time she showed up at my house at midnight, drunk, and screamed at me about how I'd ruined her life by making her look bad in comparison. David was uncomfortable with Rachel's behavior. He said, she needs to get help. This isn't healthy, and I'm not comfortable with her being around our kids when she's like this. I agreed with him, but it was hard because she's my sister. Because my mother kept saying, she's family. You have to help her. You have to forgive her. So we maintained a cordial but distant relationship. We saw her at family events. We were civil, but we weren't close. And I think that distance made Rachel's resentment worse. Have you ever had a family member who resents your success? How do you handle that resentment when it's not your fault? About 6 months before the dinner incident, Rachel started acting different. She became more present. She'd call me, she'd ask about my life. She'd seem interested in my marriage. At first I thought, maybe she was getting better. Maybe she was working through her issues. Maybe she was ready to have a real sister relationship. But then I realized she was gathering information. She'd ask David questions. How are things going at work? Do you and get along okay? How often do you travel for work? How happy are you in your marriage really? She started commenting on my marriage in a weird way. You two seem distant sometimes. I've noticed David looks stressed when you talk about work. Marriage is hard, isn't it? And I was like, what is happening? Why is she suddenly so interested in the health of my marriage? David noticed it too. He said, Rachel is acting weird. She's trying to get information from me. When you're not around, she asks me about our relationship. I said, she's just being nosy. But David said no, it's strategic. She's planning something. I dismissed his concern. I thought he was being paranoid, but he was right. Looking back, Rachel was building a narrative. She was gathering pieces that could be twisted into a story. She was creating a foundation for something. She was preparing to make an accusation. I just didn't know it yet. What's important to understand here is that Rachel wasn't discovering real problems in my marriage. She was creating the appearance of problems by asking leading questions and misinterpreting normal married behavior. When David said he'd been stressed at work, Rachel would later interpret that as David is unhappy in his marriage. When I mentioned having an argument with David about finances, Rachel would interpret that as they're barely holding it together. She was building a false narrative, brick by brick, preparing to drop it as a bomb. 2 months before the dinner, Rachel started being extra nice to David. Like, suspiciously nice. She'd touch his arm when she talked to him. She'd lean in close. She'd give him lingering hugs. And David said, okay, something is definitely happening here. She's either trying to seduce me or she's trying to make it look like she is. I thought that was crazy. Rachel wouldn't do that, but she would. And she was. I think what Rachel was doing was creating a visual narrative. If anyone ever questioned her pregnancy accusation, she could point to the flirtation and say, see? There was always something between us. She was building layers of deception before she even made the accusation. At what point would you have confronted Rachel about her strange behavior? Or would you have just let it continue? It was a Sunday dinner. My mother had invited us over. Just a small gathering, my mom, Rachel, David, and me. Rachel had been asking for this dinner specifically. She'd called my mom and said, I need to tell the family something important. My mom mentioned it to me and asked if something was wrong. I said, Rachel seems fine to me. Maybe she's got good news. I had no idea what was coming. We got to my mom's house around 5 p.m. We had appetizers. We talked about normal stuff, work, the weather, my kids' school activities. Everything was fine. Then we sat down to dinner. We were maybe 10 minutes into eating when Rachel set down her fork and said, I need to tell you all something important. My stomach dropped. I don't know why. I just had this feeling. She said I'm pregnant. My mom lit up. Oh my God, honey, that's wonderful. Congratulations. And then Rachel said, and I need to tell you who the father is. And I felt David tense next to me. She said the baby is David's. My mom's face went from joy to complete confusion to devastation. She actually made a sound like a gasp combined with a cry. David immediately said, no, that's not true. That's a lie. And I said, what the hell, Rachel? My mom started crying, like full tears, not angry, devastated. Like she couldn't believe this was happening. Rachel sat there calm. So calm, like she'd already accepted the reaction she was going to get. She said, I know this is hard to process, but I wanted you to know. I wanted to be honest. I'm going to have this baby, and I wanted the family to understand what happened. David said nothing happened. I've never touched you. This is insane. I said, Rachel, this is not funny. What are you doing? Rachel said, I'm telling the truth. And my mother looked at me and said, is this true? Is this true? Like she was begging me to say no. And I said, no, this is absolutely not true. David has never. I looked at Rachel. Why would you say this? Rachel said, because it's the truth. My mother pushed away from the table. She was crying. She said, I can't believe this. I can't believe you would do this. And I realized my mother believed her. Or at least she wanted to believe her. She was so upset that she hadn't immediately dismissed the accusation. She was treating it like it might be true. That's when I realized the damage Rachel had done. Not just to me and David, to my relationship with my mother. In that moment, what would you have done? How would you have responded? David looked at me and said, we need to get out of here. We're not staying for this. I said, no, we're staying. Rachel is going to explain herself right now. My mother was still crying, and I felt this urgency to fix it. To make her understand that Rachel was lying, I said to Rachel, when did this supposed happen? Rachel was vague. A few months ago. I said when specifically. She didn't answer directly. She said, I know it's not ideal timing, but David interrupted. He said, I have never been alone with you. I have never initiated any kind of contact with you beyond normal family politeness. This is a lie, and I don't know why you're telling it, but it's a lie. Rachel said, you don't have to admit it. The DNA test will prove it when the baby is born. And that's when I realized she wasn't claiming to have evidence. She was just making a claim and expecting us to disprove it. But here's the thing, Rachel had mentioned being pregnant. She'd said the baby was David's. But she hadn't actually been to a doctor. She hadn't had an ultrasound. She hadn't done anything to verify she was pregnant. I said, are you actually pregnant? She hesitated. And in that hesitation, I knew she wasn't pregnant. I said, you're not actually pregnant, are you? Rachel said, I am. I took a test. David said, one test isn't proof. Have you been to a doctor? She said. I have an appointment scheduled. I said when? She said next month. Next month? She'd made an accusation that shattered my family's dinner, that made my mother cry. And she hadn't even had a doctor confirm she was pregnant. My mother, who had been crying, now looked confused. She said, Rachel, are you sure you're pregnant? Rachel said, yes, I'm sure. But the doubt was there. The question was there. And I realized Rachel knew this wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. She'd planned to make the accusation. And then, what? Hope no one asked for proof. I said, I want you to go to a doctor tomorrow and get proof you're pregnant. Because if you're not pregnant, Rachel, you've just accused your sister's husband of something that could destroy our family. Rachel got quiet. And my mother, who was devastated just moments before, started to look angry. She said to Rachel, are you actually pregnant? Rachel said yes. But she wouldn't look my mother in the eye. Do you think Rachel was actually pregnant? Or do you think she was lying from the start? Rachel didn't go to a doctor the next day, or the day after. And when my mother called her and asked, Rachel got defensive. She said, I don't appreciate being interrogated about my pregnancy. And my mother said, you made a serious accusation. You owe it to this family to prove it's true. Rachel hung up. Over the next week, Rachel avoided everyone. She didn't answer calls. She didn't respond to texts. And I knew she was never pregnant. She'd made up the entire thing. But I needed to understand why. Why would she do this? Why would she make an accusation so serious, so destructive, so damaging to everyone around her? So, I went to see her. I went to her apartment and confronted her directly. She was shocked to see me. She tried to act casual, but she was clearly anxious. I said, you're not pregnant, are you? She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, I might be. I said, Rachel, you're not pregnant. You made it up. I need to know why. And she started crying. She said, because I'm sick of watching you have everything. Everything comes easy to you. You have the perfect husband, the perfect marriage, the perfect life. And you act like it's no big deal. You act like everyone can just do what you did. Like everyone can just have a good life if they work hard enough. I said, that's not true. I've worked very hard. She said, you're lying. You're lying to yourself. You got lucky. You got a good husband. You got a good job. You got everything. And you got it because you're lucky, not because you're better than me. I said, Rachel, I'm not better than you, but I can't help your life be harder. She said, but you can make your life worse. You can feel what I feel. You can have pain like I have pain. And that's when I understood. She wasn't trying to destroy David. She was trying to destroy me. She was trying to make my marriage painful. She was trying to make my perfect life not perfect anymore. She said, if everyone believed me, you'd have to deal with the consequences. Your marriage would suffer. Your relationship with your mother would be damaged. You'd know what it feels like to have your life fall apart. I said, do you understand what you just said? You were willing to destroy your family so that I'd feel bad about my life? She said, I don't know. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand you being happy. That was the moment I realized Rachel didn't need proof. She didn't need the accusation to be true. She just needed the accusation to cause damage. She was willing to devastate my mother, damage my marriage, and destroy my trust in my own sister just to make me feel as miserable as she feels. This is psychological warfare. This isn't a crime. Well, it's slander potentially, but that's complicated. This is someone using the most devastating accusation she could think of as a weapon. And what's worse is, the damage was already done. Even after Rachel admitted she'd lied, even after it was clear there was no baby and no affair, the damage lingered. My mother couldn't look at David the same way for months. There was always this tiny doubt in her mind, even though she knew Rachel had lied. My marriage was fine, but there was this conversation we had to have about how someone had tried to destroy it, about how easily an accusation, even a false one, could tear us apart. And my relationship with Rachel, it was over completely. I couldn't trust her. I couldn't forgive her, and I didn't want her in my life. If Rachel was your sister, could you forgive her, or would you cut her off completely? After Rachel admitted she'd lied, everything was messy. My mother was angry not at David, but at Rachel. She said, I cannot believe you would do this. You have destroyed my trust in you completely. Rachel tried to apologize. She said, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I was just angry. And my mother said, sorry isn't enough. You accused David of something unspeakable. You made me believe your sister was betrayed. You lied about being pregnant. What were you thinking? Rachel didn't have a good answer. My mother didn't speak to Rachel for 6 months. Eventually she did reach out, but the relationship was changed. There was a guardedness there that hadn't existed before. David and I had to have a conversation about what had happened. He said, that was terrifying. Not because I thought anyone would believe her long term, but because of how quickly I became the accused. How quickly your mother started to believe I might have done something terrible. He felt violated. He felt like his character had been attacked in the most vicious way possible. I said, I know. And I'm sorry that my sister did that to you. He said, it's not your fault. But it makes me understand why I never want Rachel in my life again. I said I don't either. And that was hard to say because she's my sister, but I couldn't get past what she'd done. Not the lie itself, but the intention behind it. The deliberate cruelty. She knew this accusation would hurt everyone. She knew it would damage relationships. And she did it anyway because she wanted me to suffer. That's not something you can come back from. My kids asked why Aunt Rachel wasn't coming around anymore. I told them Aunt Rachel made some poor choices, and we need some space from her right now. They were young enough to accept that without needing details. But I knew that when they were older, they'd ask again. And I'd have to explain that their aunt had tried to destroy their mother's marriage out of jealousy. Rachel eventually reached out to me directly. She sent a letter. She apologized for what she'd done. She said she was going to therapy. She said she was trying to work through her issues. And I appreciated that. But I couldn't forgive her. Not yet, anyway. I wrote her back and said, I'm glad you're getting help. I hope you work through whatever is driving this anger. But I can't have you in my life right now. Maybe someday, but not now. That was 2 years ago. We haven't spoken since. Do you think the poster should eventually forgive Rachel? Or is some damage too deep to repair? What stuck with me from this experience is how fragile trust is. How quickly an accusation, even a false one, can shake everything. My mother, despite knowing Rachel lied, still has this tiny doubt in the back of her mind. She'll never admit it, but I can tell. When David is kind to her, there's this moment of, not suspicion, but awareness. Awareness of what could have been. David doesn't hold a grudge, but he's more careful now. He's aware that his actions can be misinterpreted. He's more guarded, and I learned that my sister was capable of far more cruelty than I'd realized. She wasn't just struggling. She was malicious. I've also learned that I need to be careful about how much I support her, because that support could be weaponized against me. The hardest part is that Rachel is still my sister. We share a childhood. We have shared memories and family history, but I can't be close to someone who tried to destroy my marriage. My mother eventually reached a point of cautious reconciliation with Rachel. They see each other at family events. It's cordial, but not warm. Rachel has apologized multiple times, but apologies don't erase what happened. The accusation hangs over things. Every interaction with Rachel is filtered through the knowledge of what she was willing to do. I think that's the real consequence of what Rachel did. Not that she wasn't pregnant. Not even that she lied. But that she destroyed the possibility of trust in our relationship. I used to think of Rachel as someone who was struggling, but ultimately good. Someone who just needed support and time. Now I think of Rachel as someone who is fundamentally damaged in a way that makes her dangerous to people close to her. Someone who weaponizes her pain to hurt others. And I don't know how to come back from that knowledge. If I could go back in time, I don't know what I'd do differently. I tried to be supportive. I tried to be patient. I tried to have boundaries when necessary. But Rachel was always going to be angry at me for having a life that worked out. And that anger was always going to find a way to express itself. I just didn't know it would be this way. Looking back, do you think there were warning signs that Rachel was capable of this? Or did this come out of nowhere? So that's the story. And what makes it resonate is that it's not about infidelity. It's about what happens when someone is so envious, so angry, so desperate to make others feel as bad as they do, that they're willing to make an accusation so devastating, so impossible to fully disprove, that it damages everyone around them. Rachel didn't just lie about being pregnant and David's baby, she weaponized the accusation to hurt me. And in doing so, she hurt everyone who loves me. The real cost of that accusation isn't that it was eventually disproven. It's that it created doubt. It created awareness. It changed how my mother looks at David. It changed how David sees his place in this family. It changed how I see my sister. And that damage doesn't go away just because the accusation was false. I want to ask you, if someone close to you made an accusation this serious, even if it was later disproven, would you be able to fully trust them again? And here's a harder question. If someone in your life is so envious of you that they're willing to destroy you, what's your responsibility? Do you keep trying to support them? Do you set boundaries? Do you cut them off? There's no perfect answer. But I think what this story shows is that sometimes protecting yourself and your family means letting go of the relationship that's causing the harm. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been accused of something you didn't do? How did it affect your relationships? Thanks for watching. If this story made you think about family loyalty, betrayal, and the cost of accusations, please hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.